Welcome to another episode of the Simon Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Battisto. Today's guest is Riley Orozco. Riley Orozco was my coach when I was at CSUB for 2 years, and then he left in 2016 to go coach at Boise State. He was there for a year before, unfortunately, they dropped their program. Excited just to catch up with them. Haven't talked to them in a while. Really just looking forward to some good conversation, and I hope you guys enjoy the show.
Cool.
That was probably like one of the funniest things that I had seen. Was like the whole snowball thing. It was funny because we just drove up to Reno for Reno Worlds.
Okay.
And
yeah.
Every time we
were you up there too?
Were you there?
Yeah.
Dude, I was at the tournament. I was at the tournament the whole time.
Oh, yeah. I showed up for day one. My nephew was wrestling. And my sister's getting ready to have another kid, and I think my wife and I said we're done. So we brought a bunch of baby stuff down for her, and Reed was coming up. So it's like, good excuse. And yeah, obviously I'm from that area to go see family and Reed and everyone. But yeah, I was looking for like you're posting something, or I thought maybe I'd ran into you, but I never saw you actually like post anything. So I'm like, maybe it's you didn't make the trip.
No,
anyway,
I wasn't there. I wasn't there Thursday.
Okay.
But we got in maybe. So I left right after school Thursday.
Okay.
And then it's like a 6.5, 7 hour trip drive.
Yep.
But yeah, every time we go over that pass, and it was a little snowy on the way up.
Yeah.
And I always think back to the first time, I went over there, and it was, that moment where, I don't know. So I can always tell it from my side, but I think when you say it from your perspective, like when those snowballs were going over your head, when Sean was throwing them, and dude, just classic. Like we're in the car, and we're following you guys because we're redshirting. So Matt Gamble's driving, Tyler Lawrence is in there, Dylan's in the passenger seat, and then Sean is on the other side of the back seat, closer to where the snow on the side is. And we're pulling over, and you're getting the chains on the vans.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Matt Williams and maybe somebody else from that van got out, and then Dylan and Sean got out on our side, and they're having a snowball fight.
Yeah.
So you're getting frustrated trying to put the chains on the cars,
Yeah.
and those guys are throwing snowballs. And all I hear from Matt Gamble in the front, he's like, "Oh crap, they hit coach." And I was like, "See, I told you guys, you should have stayed in here. You shouldn't have done all that crap." So they come running in, and all I see is just fuming mad. And you thought it was Dylan at first, and the car was locked. So you try to pull, and you're like, open the door, and Sean owned up to it. He's like, "That was me. Like I threw it." And you're just like, "We got business to settle." And then that was it. We were waiting the whole, during the warm up, during the tournament at some point, maybe on the way home, for you to do something. And then it was after practice, maybe on Monday, you're like, "Hey, let's go over your stand up or something like that." And you just, Matt returned them, and Matt returned them, and Matt returned them. And I was like, "Oh, I know what this is."
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So we're trying to beat the storm. You get to the point we got to put on chains. I think I was the only one that really knew how to put on chains. So, I'm going around trying to do this, right? And yeah, I had all my winter gear on and putting on his chains. I'm kind of getting a little frustrated, like you said, right? Because just the clearance in those vans isn't very much. I'm just trying to make sure I get everything centered. And all of a sudden, it was like Luke Skywalker in the Death Star, right? Like the little, he hit the back of my neck, and the snow went down my shirt. And if he would hit me in the shoulder or something else, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. But the only open spot of exposed skin, was my neck, and it just snowballed right down my neck, down my shirt. I'm like, "Yo, you gotta be kidding me." So yeah, I didn't want to mess with them before competition. I obviously want you guys to do good, but it was I was just thinking, and I remember his mom be like, "It was an accident. It was an accident." I'm like, "It's okay. I'm not gonna kick him off the team or anything. We're just gonna have to learn some lessons, right? It's a learning curve. Everyone has to go through it." So, and it was all fun and games until he tweaked his knee on one of the mat returns. And then I was like, "Oh, great.
Dang it."
210-pound coach, mat returns 157-pounder. What's this going to look like?
You did. Yeah, but you did get him ice after.
Yes, I did.
You did get him ice.
Yep. So, yeah, I didn't make him walk off and go get himself. So
it's weird thinking about just all the shenanigans that maybe me, Dylan, and Sean got into And it's
Yeah.
like I always felt like I was the voice of reason. And
Yeah.
then Sean would encourage Dylan to do something stupid. And then it would always lead to trouble. And I'd be like, I told you guys, you should just stay in the car.
Yeah. Yeah. It's usually how it is, right? There's usually one voice of reason, and well, it's like the two like little like angel and devil, right?
Yeah.
Do it. No, I don't do it. So, but yeah.
Well, I think it's
But
cool too. It's like all of us are kind of different, like maybe a little bit different, like personality and character wise.
Mhm.
But I think about some of my best friends from being on the team. We're all a little bit different. But kind
Mhm.
of what brought us all together was, for one, the wrestling, and then also like the humor.
Yeah.
It's like I don't necessarily need to know you that well, but if like we talk about wrestling and you like wrestling and I like wrestling, it's all of a sudden, yeah, we can laugh and we can joke and we can
Yeah.
be cool.
Yeah. Well, and it's my father-in-law brought that up one time. He was a basketball player, played a couple years D2 back in the 70s, and they were out here visiting us in Boise. They live in Nebraska, and I saw some old Boise State wrestlers at the farmers market downtown here. And so, stop and obviously, kind of do the little hug, but like almost like clinch lockup,
Yeah.
the, the traditional wrestler hug, and we just start talking, and it's just like nothing, right? And so then 5 minutes go by, and then we split ways. And my father like goes, that's something I noticed about like you wrestlers. He goes like, I don't care like where you guys are at. He goes like, if you see another wrestler, like you stop and talk. He goes like, you could be in an airport, a city where neither one of you guys are from. You see another wrestler, like you guys stop, you talk, and there's usually some kind of interaction. Because you don't see that with other sports, basketball players, you don't see that football players or whatever. I was like, yeah, I go, it's different. I go, there's just a different bond. Obviously, all sports relate people in different ways, but just that, the grind or the work or the things that you do, like, you could take any wrestling room, I think, in the United States, and you're going to have the same type of characters, the same type of experiences for the most part, as far as practices and things that you go through, the same struggles. I mean, they're not going to be a one for one, but they're going to parallel each other, right? So there's that common ground. And yeah, I just think that's something that's very unique in wrestling. I think probably all combat sports is like that, but at least for me, that's what I noticed in wrestling. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much, right? So
Yeah, it's a fraternity, and it's funny. Like I'm sure this has happened to you. You'll be at like a grocery store, and like some random person be like, "Oh, you wrestle?" And then be like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, well, my cousin was like a state champ or something like that."
Mhm.
It was funny. We were driving back from Reno, and it gets to be a little bit of a late drive, so we stop at the gas station to get some caffeine, and checking out, and I think pretty a reasonably social guy, and
Mhm.
I'm talking to the guy that's the gas station attendant, and he's like, "Oh, you're a wrestler?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm coaching right now. We're just coming back from a big tournament." He's like, "Oh, like my cousin was a state champ." We're in Turlock, so
Okay.
I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Well, what's his name?" And he's like, it's Joey Martinez.
Yeah.
It's like he coaches at Menlo right now. I'm like, "Oh yeah, like he recruited me like out of high school. Like I know who that is."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was funny because most of the time when people say that, it's like it's just some random dude.
Yeah.
And I think about Kirk Moore, who one
Yep.
time
Yep.
coached at Frontier. He used to have a book that had
Mhm.
all the state medalists and all the state champs from every single year.
Oh, really?
So he used to like check people. Like he
Oh,
used to keep that thing on him sometimes, going to big events and be like, "Oh, really? Like, what's his name? I'll see if
yeah.
he
Yeah.
actually did it." But yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like that's super common too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a sport that has a vast reach, right? I think, everybody knows somebody who wrestles for the most part, and I've uh I've come across more people that say I wish I would have wrestled. That's kind of a common theme that I hear, right? I did it
Yeah.
for a year, and then whatever reason they got out of it, or I really would have liked to done it, but just didn't know how to get into it, or maybe the singlets, that's what I hear. But yeah, I mean it's yeah, those are the two big things. I hear people talk about how they know somebody that wrestled and that they wish they would have wrestled. So
Yeah, and people sometimes, be in it and then maybe take a break and then come back into it. It's funny. Reed's coaching now,
Yeah.
So I see him at like the local youth tournaments and stuff like that. And so we hosted a tournament yesterday, and then
Yeah.
is hosting the next KCWA tournament. So Reed's picking up the trailer, and it was funny. We were just texting back and forth just to make sure that he got it. He's like, "Well, what are you doing right now?" I'm like, "Well, I'm about to be on a podcast with your brother." He's like, "Oh, that's cool."
Yeah. So, have you heard the story how I got into wrestling, or we got into wrestling?
I don't think so.
Okay. So Reed was 4 years old, going on 5, and yeah, so he was like that uh typical just boy, just all gas, no break, mischievous, like get into trouble. Like we go to like the daycare, and like he's fighting kids that are a year, 2 years older than him. Like he didn't care, like he just was fearless, right? And my parents just like, like how do we just wear this kid out? And so we had some family friends like, get him into wrestling. And so anyway, yeah. So he's gonna wrestle. He's kind of excited about it. They asked me, I'm like, I'm all right. I don't need to. And so they're okay. And our parents didn't have very much money at all at the time. And to like where my grandparents had to put up like for us to get shoes or entry fee and like all that stuff. And so anyway, night before practice, so practice would have been the next day, but the night, Reed and I shared a room. Said he's 4. He would be turning 5 at the end of the season. I was 6, gonna turn 7. And he goes, "Hey Riley, you going to practice tomorrow, wrestling?" I go, "No." He goes, "Well, I'm not gonna go if you don't go." So Reed, you gotta go. He's like, "No, I'm not going if you don't go." I'm like, right. I did remember, like, I'm on the top bunk looking at the ceiling and like, all right. So in the morning I wake up, tell my mom, like, "Hey, I want to wrestle." She's like, "Gosh darn it, Riley, like we asked you, 2 or 3 weeks ago and you didn't want to do it." And so like, figure out a way, get us all signed up, right? And then, about 30 years later, here I am, right? And I tell people wrestling changed the course of our family tree, provided a lot of opportunities. Definitely, I think is yeah, has done more good than anything. But yeah, Reedy, he was a terror when he wrestled. Like he was, yeah, naturally more gifted than I was. Just had that mentality. Um, but yeah, kind of fell out of it, and yeah, now he's back in it, and I think he's happy. So it's good.
Yeah, I think it's cool just how like he was the one that maybe was kind of the leader in that in terms of like I'm gonna go do this, but he didn't want to do it if you didn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's funny that because he stopped wrestling maybe in middle school.
Yeah, so he did it pretty consistently till middle school, and then, um, yeah, so he went through a weird growth spurt, where like, and being in like rural Nevada, like there's not a whole lot of like wrestling or like some of the tournament numbers weren't big, but like he grew, but didn't have anyone to wrestle, so like he would have to wrestle up in age division, and so like when
Yeah,
you're 5th, 6th grade and you're wrestling up to like 7th, 8th graders, like that's a big jump, even though it's only a year and a half, just maturity wise, right? But kids are starting to hit puberty, and so that kind of turned him off to it. And so, yeah, he just, and then, yeah, decided he didn't want to do it anymore and whatnot. But yeah, no, he was pretty good. He still is. Like you mess around with him, he's fast. He's got some good hips. Like just he's got that natural ability. He knows where he needs to be. So helps that
it's
he's
pretty.
strong as an ox too. So
Yeah, I was just about to say that he's pretty strong.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny seeing him up there in Reno, just kind of getting after it. And it's like he's getting more and more involved, like not just in coaching, but like helping, like picking up a trailer for a tournament, like driving his truck, like going to those bigger tournaments in Reno.
yeah.
Did you guys ever do that stuff when you were younger, like going to like Reno or some of those bigger tournaments?
Oh yeah. So like I remember the WoW when Jack Roller, and this is all from being a kid perspective, but so the club that I grew up in was the Fallon Outlaws. My dad and a guy that he went to high school with and wrestled in high school, and then his name's Wade Workman. He was a JUCO wrestler up at Susanville or Lassen. Um, anyway, they took over the club that we were wrestling in, and I remember when Jack Roller wanted to start this tournament in Reno, and like the small towns all getting together and collectively getting all the mats up to the Reno Livestock Event Center. Like I remember the first year the WOW happened up there. So when we go to that, we would go over to Vacaville quite a bit growing up and wrestle. So like just like Clayton Jack, if you remember the name. Yep.
Yeah, Oregon State.
Oregon State, yeah. So like we would go over there and they would come to Reno, and like we've known the Jacks for, like I said, the better part of 25, 30 years now. Just yeah, we go over there, wrestle, they come over and wrestle, see them in different places. We go down to Vegas quite a bit. And then as I got older, like we go to Fargo. So we did a fair amount of traveling, and then as kids, and then once I got into high school, my football team wasn't very good. I think probably my whole high school career, we won like 9 games total. So,
Dang.
so I recognized that wrestling, if I wanted to go anywhere or do anything, wrestling was going to be my ticket. And we had a pretty good wrestling program. We had a group of probably about 8 to 10 kids that grew up wrestling since we were little, and we traveled all over to get together. Would wrestle these big tournaments. A couple guys, were in the Western Regional Finals or won the TOC, Kids National, stuff like that. And so we had a pretty good group of wrestlers, and so my high school team was pretty good. But I realized that I could control my path in wrestling. Where like football, I needed to have, some good receivers or quarterbacks or running backs. Everyone had to work hard, right? And that's what our success determined. But in wrestling, I needed partners, and I had some. But the harder that I worked, the more successful I was going to be. So I really latched onto it, and so, my dad and I, we traveled quite a bit. High school, just all over. Once high school season was done, like I said, to Vegas, to California, to you name it, we were all over the place, going to different camps. Just a lot of windshield time.
Yeah, and I think that time that you're spending in those long car rides, I think especially, whether it's with your teammates or your dad or whoever, I think that's kind of where you have that bonding time too.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's just where you figure out the world, right? I mean, I think about some of the best times I've had, traveling all over with, Mitch Montero, Mike Larson, I can name a lot of different guys. And just the conversations, right? What you see of the world, how you perceive it, solving problems, right? And just that common bond. Or even with coaches, right? I was fortunate enough that Coach Kerr would made me ride with him quite a bit. So, I heard a lot of things from his perspective, just the different things that he encountered during his coaching career. Maybe whether it was for the better or for the worse, but yeah, so you figure out a lot of things in that travel time, right? So
I feel like he would have been a cool person to talk to. Sure.
Yeah, yeah, man, like if you get him and you get talking and you start talking about different subjects or just different things that he encountered, he had a lot of good stuff. I know there's usually 2 camps when you talk about Coach Kerr. Either guys loved him or maybe they didn't. So, but I mean, the one thing I felt like with Coach is you always knew where he stood. And, whether you're a Kerr believer or not, like you can't really argue with what he did with what he had. He wasn't a national qualifier. Wrestled at the conference at San Jose State, and then was just the assistant coach, and then the head coach left, and then he was thrust into the head coach position, and then had some success down there, or up there, I should say, at San Jose State. Did pretty well. Josie left for Oklahoma State, and he interviewed for the Cal State position. To kind of leverage more money out of San Jose State, and ended up getting the job, and then did some phenomenal things there. I think, there's definitely a lot to unpack there, but there's a lot of things you could take and you could definitely use. And he always had a saying, do as I say, not as I do. So sometimes, so I mean, he'd be the first to admit it, but yeah. So no, it was like I said, those are some of the better times, looking back. Yeah, having conversations with coach and just learning about the old days and the different things that he did and what he had and how he overcame it or tried to fix things. So
with, I think I'm trying to remember his name. It's Steve Arnella. He
yeah,
is a hunter, and he's actually like I started watching Meat Eater, and I don't hunt, like I don't really fish, but it was I started watching it kind of just randomly, and what kind of impressed me was just like his intellect and like his approach to things. And one of the things that he talks about is like there's different kind of grades of fun. Like there's like roller coaster fun that you'll kind of be on. It's like, oh, that was fun. Like that was kind of fun in the moment. And then there's things that are more like doing something really hard than the time. It sucks and it's really uncomfortable. But like 5 or 10 years later, you're with your buddies that kind of you went through that with. He's like, oh, dude, remember that early morning workout where this happened? Or you remember, at this point when practice when this thing happened, like, man, that was so much fun. It's like that was it was a higher quality of fun. It's something that you'll talk about 5 to 10 years from now, and it'll be fun at that point. Not necessarily maybe fun in the moment. Carlo was telling me this story because we were talking about just old Cal State stuff, and he was talking about how like one of his molars popped out. They were doing it was red flag day, so they're doing it's like 20-minute go, 20-minute go, 20-minute go with 3 different partners, and you don't take a break. And like maybe he said like maybe in the first like 5 minutes he gets maybe like a knee or something to his jaw, and his molar like splits, and he feels it dangling every time he breathes in. He says it's like the air hits his gum, and he's just in so much pain. So he kind of runs over to Kerr, and he's like, hey, is my tooth hanging out? And Kerr like says, open your mouth. And he's like, nah, you're good. I don't see anything. And he's like, well, crap. So he just went back and he just wrestled the whole time. And after he goes, he goes to the doctor, and he's like, he has to get like a crown put in or something like that. And, ends up being all jacked up. It's like at the time, it's like, there's nothing you can do. But talking about it now, it's like, oh man, that sucks.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, some people might have different approaches, but I've seen coach do that quite a few times, even myself. Like, remember my first year, did a little down block from a double leg and split my eye open, and it just was pouring out blood. And I'm like trying to like wipe it up and stop. And it was one of those red flag days and mad hour. That's what we call it, mad hours. And he yells at me, just knock it off, keep wrestling. I'm like, all right, if you don't care, then I don't care. Like, and just, but then you realize like what you can accomplish, right? Coming just, a couple months out of high school and thinking like, oh man, I'm gonna have to get stitches. I gotta stop. I gotta, do all this. And now it's like, no, get going right now. Like, don't stop, keep wrestling. And it just changes your perspective, what you can accomplish. Right. And it's just, again, a little building block, right, of your mental toughness and things that, that you can recall on when you're faced with that, right? If you're in a match and you're going back and forth and you get hurt, like that's not the time to try to figure out whether you're tough or not. It's all the little building blocks along the way, that give you that confidence. All right, yeah, I tweaked my knee, or I got hurt, or the ref, made a bad call against me, but I'm mentally tough enough because I've had all these little building blocks along the way that prepared me for this moment. And now, it's no big deal. Just step up and go. Right. And so I've seen him do that a number of times. I've seen a lot of guys get pissed off at him, but after the fact, they're kind of like, well, you know what? Like, I kind of got to respect him because I didn't think I could do it, but obviously I'm still here. So
yeah. You didn't die, your eye's still there.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of like what you said. It's like you're trying to guide these young men, young people through these workouts to where it's like you want to challenge them, but you also don't want them to break. I mean, I think in college it's a little bit different. But when I try to apply like these stories to high school, it's like I can't necessarily, if a kid's bleeding all over the mat, I can't, because I also don't want to lose my job either. Like it's a little bit of a different world, maybe.
High school, you walk a finer line, right? I mean, at least in college, like you're an adult, you're a grown man. Like it's you can make your own decisions, right? So no, that'd be a little bit difficult in high school. But
it's hard. it's hard building toughness. Like it's hard, I think, coaching guys or wrestlers to be a little bit maybe tougher than where they're at. And that's maybe the challenge that kind of we're going through right now. And it's just we're trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's just it doesn't have to be something that's monumental, right? It doesn't have to be the aha moment where there's the 80s training montage and music, right? It doesn't have to be a big thing. It's just little things, right? And it's just standards that you accept or don't accept, right? Whatever that might be. Just little things here, little things there. Like I remember, I don't know if you were on the team yet or not, but we were having morning drills and Ceballos was running it. And we usually would have, it was kind of in that weird space, like where it was warm in the day, so you had the AC on in the practice room, right? So it was at least comfortable. And then you'd turn it off, and turn the heater on if we had morning practice. Well, I forgot to turn on the heater at night. So we roll into morning practice and it's like 52 degrees in the wrestling room. I'm like, oh gosh, it's cold. So I kick on the heaters real quick. And guys are rolling in, the mats are hard, and they're like, what the heck? And they're, just not cool with it. I'm like, hey, knock it off. Like, we'll be all right. Like, you know what? Like, you never know. You never know what it's going to be like where you're training or where you got to cut weight or where you got to do this, right? And just kind of go on that kick. And I'm sure guys probably rolled their eyes at me and just were like, well, lo and behold, like 2 weeks later, we go to Vegas for the Cliff Keen and they're moving in. They only had like half the mat set up and they're moving the other half the mats in. And so they had like 2 of their garage or bay doors open and it's just cold, right? And it was funny. We're getting ready to get our workout in. And the guy's like, Coach, it's just like practice a couple weeks ago, right? And it's funny, you can hear like all the other teams as they're walking in, like they're complaining, like, how am I supposed to cut weight in this? How are we supposed to wrestle in this? How are we supposed to do that? And I'm like, see, I had it planned out, guys, all along. Like I knew this. But yeah, like it's just little things and kind of going back to just everyday things. Like I got 2 boys, a 4-year-old McCray and a 18-month-old boy, Murdoch. And so across the street, we have a school and it has like this track on the backside of it, little paved walking, running path. And so I got him riding his pedal bike. And so I got my bike and I'm pulling the bike trailer with the little guy in it and we're racing, right? So it's a third of a mile each lap. So we do 1 lap. And then the second lap, like I pass McCray and I'm just like I'm just the carrot, right? And I'm just dangling in front of him and he's going as hard as he can. And we're getting ready to finish that second lap. And I kind of look back and I could see he's working and he yells, Dad, I'm running out of air. My legs hurt. Slow down. And I go, nope. I go, you better find another gear, you speed racer. And he's watching like this Hot Wheels show as of lately. And there's something where they yell like, watch out, here comes danger. And like some comes zooming by him. Well, all of a sudden he does that. Watch out, here comes danger. And he just starts pedaling as hard as he can, like, his head down. And he's going. And I just let him keep coming. And we're just like neck and neck. And then I let him pass me like the last 20, 25 yards. And then, he was pretty excited. And so afterwards I talked to him like, hey man, good job. He's like, yeah. I go, you know what I'm proud of? And he's like, what? I'm like, he's like, that I won. I'm like, well, I'm happy, but I go, more proud you didn't quit. He kind of looks at me and like, yeah, you didn't quit, right? He goes, well, no. I go, if you would have quit, would you have won? Well, no. I go, okay. I go, so just remember, like when things get hard, don't quit. Like it's where you're learning. You're still trying to get things like, are you as strong as me? Well, no. I go, not yet. I go, someday you will be. I go, someday you'll be bigger and stronger than me. I go, but if you would have quit, you never will ever get there. And so he was all proud, and that's the one thing I just keep pressing upon him was like, just don't quit, keep going. Like it's all learning, and just building that resiliency, right? And so I see it from time to time. Like I kind of help out with our kids club and I'll grab like the 4, 5, 6-year-olds and just teach them real basic fundamental stuff. And I'll put them in some situations where they got to wrestle. And there's been some times where this other kid, they're just battling, right? And just different competitive type stuff. And they're just battling back and forth. And, he ends up getting losing. He comes over and he's like, well, Dad, I didn't quit. I got to work harder so I can do better next time. Like, that's it. That's all I want. And so, yeah, just pressing that upon them, right? And so it's just little things, just little things here, little things there. And yeah, and it's just an everyday habit that you got to press upon them, right?
At what point or when did you really start wrestling your son, McCray?
You know, I have a friend up here, Levi Jones. We coached at Boise State that one year, and we've talked about it. Like, I mean, I know I started early, but I was terrible. Like, I only had one really like successful year from like when I started until like my junior year in high school. I guess my freshman, sophomore year was like 500. But I think it's kind of a little bit case by case, right? Where he's mentally mature enough, right, to understand like to get out there, compete, and just work the things that he's learned. And I tell parents too all the time, like, I coached in college for a little bit and I've been around some pretty successful wrestlers. And I never recruited anybody off their elementary statistics, off their middle school statistics, right? Like, there's a lot of growth that happens. And even in your high school career, right? You look at like someone like Reuben Franklin, right? Or even a Steve Neal, those type of guys. But as far as him, maybe when he's 6, 7, or 8, he really wants it, right? He really likes it. He gets the concept. The other thing too is, once he understands, learns how to wrestle. Like, I've seen a lot of kids, and I didn't realize this until I got out of coaching college wrestling and then was back more involved with kids club. But these first year kids, they come out, they practice for maybe a month, and then they're excited for the first tournament, and then they go to the first tournament and they wrestle a combined of between two matches like of 30 seconds, and they get throttled, right? Because there's so many different positions and things that you got to learn in wrestling, like just to not get beat. And now they don't like it. They're like, well, that sucked, right? Versus like say T-ball or flag football or those other games or sports where you just lose on points and then you go home, but you still got to play the whole thing, right? Versus wrestling, it's very intimate, and someone held you against your will in positions that you didn't like. And so I always tell parents, like, hey, you got to read your kid. If your kid's aggressive or just has that maturity where they'll be fine, I go, that's great. Maybe they can start sooner. I go, but let them learn the sport. Let them learn how to fight off their back. Like, let them learn how to, all these little positions where they get good at, because I think wrestling's just so fast paced and there's so many different, you hit this, there's a counter to that, and then a counter and a counter and a counter, to where, if you had a solid year or a solid 6 months of just understanding wrestling and learning basics, like, I think people would enjoy it, get off to a better start, and be able to compete, right? And that's the thing, you want to be able to compete. You don't necessarily need to win. You want them to win, but you want them to learn how to compete and be competitive, right? So they keep coming back. So that's kind of the approach I'm taking on it. When he's ready and he wants to, right? Set him up for success,
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're being patient.
Yeah.
You're trying to kind of put the training in a situation where it kind of depends on his needs and where he's at. Yeah. I feel like there's too many situations where I see parents, they think, oh, we have to be competitive as soon as possible. Yeah. And for somebody that's wrestled pretty much every single level, and I've been around people that have wrestled since they were a little kid and maybe have been good since they were a little kid. It's like I see what happens to some of these guys when they make it in high school and college. There was actually a kid, he was maybe going for like the trendy award when he was like maybe like 8U or something like that. Mm-hmm. And ends up losing to one of our kids, and his dad was like super involved, like was taking him all these different big tournaments, and they were training like 5 or 6 times a week, and they were getting all these practices in. It's like, man, this kid's really good. But he's 8. Yeah. And then he ends up losing this Trinity Award, and some things happen with the parents, and they end up splitting up. And it was funny. One of our dads kind of keeps in track, keeps in contact with that family, and the kid's like, stop wrestling, doesn't do any sports, just plays video games, a little bit overweight. And it's like, well, what happened? It's like, you peaked when you were 8. Yeah. It's like, I want kids to enjoy the sport. I always want them to think back like on their time wrestling. It's like they got something out of it in some way that's positive to where they're lifelong fans of it. Yeah. And when it's time for them to have kids. They want their kids to wrestle.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously we want to win and we want to be competitive. And I think that's really important. But both those things can happen at the same time.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to choose one or the other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at a lot of and you're hearing it more now, right? But just talk about like the process, right? And it kind of gets a little bit cliche and maybe it gets overused. But if you really break it down, like it is a process, right? I think about my wrestling career and where it's been and how it even just led into my coaching career. And even as a coach, like, just the things I would do now versus when I was coaching you guys, versus when I first started coaching, like just it's always growing. It's always, you do what you think's right at the time, right? But there's got to be that perspective too. But it is a process, right? And I think you appreciate that more the older you get. And I think the guys who are really successful, they figure that out at an early age, right? That it's not so much about being good or the accolades. It's about just getting better, right? Enjoying and always improving, right? So the earlier you can figure that out and actually figure it out and not just say it, I think you'll probably, your learning curve's gonna be steeper, I think. So yeah.
I get caught in the middle sometimes. And I'm very thankful I got guys like Carl Franciotti, and I don't know if you know Sean Sheets.
Yeah.
So I got both those guys around me and Kirk Moore, and I feel like whenever maybe I go one direction a little bit too much, they're able to kind of check me. There was a moment a couple of years ago now where there was a call that I felt needed to be made from the corner, and it was a short time, and we had just gotten a takedown, but we're still down by one. And it's like short time, no stall calls. We're probably not going to turn this guy. We probably need to go neutral and hope we can get a takedown. And they're getting maybe a little bit animated in the corner. And I love those guys. So we end up talking about this after. But I'm yelling like, put him on his feet, put him on his feet. And they're not doing it. So I freaking run over the corner and I do it for him. And thankfully it worked out. We ended up got an underhook and like fake snapped and punched a cobra and pinned the kid with like, I don't know, less than 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And, I walk off the mat and I'm like pretty fuming mad still. And Sean was able to kind of check me a little bit. He's like, hey, let's get breakfast tomorrow. So we get brunch and we're talking. And he's just like, hey, like, I understand like what you're trying to do. But like, dude, you don't need to like cut in front of somebody because now it's like, yeah, you want to win. But it's like at what cost? It's like you want to like break apart these relationships with these people that, you say that you care about and that put their trust in you. It's like, is that the right way to do it? And he said it in a way that kind of led me to that kind of thought instead of just, pointing his finger and saying, this is how you need to do it.
Yeah.
But I always feel like whenever I kind of go in one direction where maybe I'm not being intense enough as a coach, or I'm maybe getting a little bit too locked in about winning. I'm thankful I have this mentorship where people can kind of like put their hand on my shoulder and be like, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And kind of be able to steer me in the right direction. I think that's super important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, like it's a tribe, right? I mean, I think you got to seek those people out that can balance you, that have done it. Yeah, and it's just constant growth, right? I'm sure at some point, you'll be that guy. You'll have a young assistant with you, and they'll do something, and you'd be like, "Hey, man!" Like, again, it's just all reps, right? It comes back to, you hit a double leg like this all the time, and then you get burned on it one time, and someone's like, "Hey, think about it like this or like that," and then all of a sudden you just keep growing, right? And yeah, as long as you have that perspective and you're able to take input, you're able to just admit when you're wrong, right? Admit when you're wrong, when you need some help, admit to when, hey, you know what? I need to figure this out and just take some mentorship. That's the biggest thing, right? I don't think it ever stops, right? It spans across, all aspects of life right now. I'm a firefighter now, and I'm not the world's best firefighter. I don't know everything. So like every day, like I'm just asking like, hey, like situations, what would you do here? How would we do this? What are your thoughts? Have you come across this before? Especially me now, 36 years old and have a little bit more, essentially I've already done it once, right? I've already, I had a career as a wrestler. I've had a career as a coach. So, coming into essentially another career, I've done it a couple of times, understanding, okay, like how just to refine it and approach it. And hopefully, this time is better. And just apply that to all aspects, right? Whether it's raising my boys, seek counsel from other parents, like, hey, man, like, what are some things that worked for you? Some things that haven't worked for you? And just listen, right? Marriages. Maybe I'm not never first time being married. I don't want it to be the only time I'm married. So, I'll ask, hey, what do you guys do? You guys seem to have something that's successful. So, right. It's just being humble enough to understand and learn. So,
What was it like, kind of being done coaching and like kind of getting into this new career path? Because I would think if you're in the firefighting academy, maybe at the time you were what, like 30, 31 when that
30,
happened?
32
So
going.
you're 32 years old, and I feel like you're probably were maybe one of the older guys in the class.
Yeah. I was second
What was
oldest
that
guy.
like?
Yeah. It was good. It's kind of funny. I have a new respect for guys that have kids while they're wrestling in college. I mean, it's kind of parallels each other going through the fire academy, right? You're dedicated to this. They're throwing a lot at you. They're trying to stress you out. You're learning something brand new, right? I'd never done any prior fire service. Never ran any medical EMS calls before. So I'm learning this whole new thing from the ground up while being a dad, being a husband. So I'm trying to balance that. Um, in the same sense, right? Got to come in, got to be humble, right? I'm Brother Orozco. These are my accolades, but they don't mean anything here, right? I got to come in, put my boots on the same way as everyone else. I got to do everything the same way everyone else does, and that was just my approach, right? Learn, ask, don't be afraid to make mistakes. When they ask for volunteers, get out there, even if you look stupid, you do it wrong. Get out there because that's the best. Because whatever you do wrong or you do right, they're going to point out, and you're going to get that one-on-one critiquing versus maybe from your peers. Like the instructor is going to set you up for success down the road. But in the same sense too, it's kind of funny because you get in there and everyone's just super grateful to be in the position they're in. It's a great job. It's fun. It's the closest thing I'll ever get to being back in a college room. I tell people. And so you're almost just like, I'm humble, I'm thankful, blah, blah, blah. And so for me, I almost like put it on a pedestal for a little bit. And then there were some times where, I wasn't maybe performing to the level that I should have. And I had one of my instructors pull me aside. He goes, "Gosh darn it, Orozco." He goes, "You're a badass wrestler. I expect you to be one now." Yes, sir. And so after that, I was like, I really went home and I'm driving home and I'm thinking, I'm like, of all the hard stuff I've done and the positions I've been in, I'm like, they're not making me do anything that I haven't already done. Like some of these workouts, they're not that hard. Everyone else around me thinks they're hard, but I'm thinking about the times I've cut weight and then I had to go do this and I had to go do that. And all the trying stuff I've had over my wrestling career. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? I'm humble and grateful, but it's not harder than anything I've done before. And when I was like, okay, be confident, right? Not cocky. I'm not, so humble that I'm just putting it on a pedestal, but I'm confident in what I can and can't do. Like then it was like my learning curve just skyrocketed. But it was good times. Like I said, my academy was 20 weeks long. We had 15 people in our academy, and yeah, it was a little bit like being on a college team again, right? Just going through all the same trials and tribulations, having to go through stuff. Someone messes up, we all got to pay the price, or all helping each other and pushing each other. It was a good time. So
Yeah, I heard because we have a couple guys that have been on our staff or on our staff right now that are firefighters, and they kind of describe sometimes the academy or like being on like in an actual firehouse is kind of like a little bit of a frat house to some extent, just because you're hanging out with the boys and you guys are in your downtime you're working out and stuff like that. So in a lot of ways, is it kind of similar to that element of being a college wrestler as well? It's like you get to kind of be around these guys all the time and you get to kind of form those bonds.
Yeah. Uh, well, I'm trying to think like, yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, I leave home for 48 hours and I'm with, right now I'm a senior firefighter. So that means I drive all the time. So I'm with the captain and then I'm with the firefighter sits in the back. And yeah, it's just us for, 2 days in a row. So it's just like you're having your college roommates again, right? You're
Yeah.
encountering all these things, you're working out, you're going to these different calls, you're having to figure out these problems. You're going through the suck, if you get up 2, 3, 4 times at a night, it sucks, but you're all there together. And then the next day, you kind of have that same humor, right? You're talking about earlier with, what happens in the restroom room. Like, you have that same humor, you all have the same experiences. And so, yeah, and then it's like, all right, well, at the end of the shift, like you go home and hang out with the family, and then it's like you kind of get excited. All right, got to go hang out with my buddies again. So yeah, it's a one for one. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, but it's a cousin of it, if you will.
Yeah. I was thinking about this too, because we just had Adam Hall on the show,
Yeah.
and he's a Boise State guy, and just left where he was at basically to go take on a head coaching job. And I was thinking about from the perspective of having a coach leave and how hard it is, and I was kind of reminiscing a little bit. I don't know if you remember when I got punched in the eye,
How could I
and
forget?
yeah, that was I was at home because I had surgery, and then I had like a post-op thing that they were having me do, and I was like gonna come back like the next week,
Mhm.
and Matt Penychek sent me a text, or no, he called me. First he sent me a picture, and then he called me,
Yeah.
and it was basically like, hey, just wanted to let you know because I know you're not here. Mendoza's leaving, and like we're not. I was like, what? And I was like in shock. And I was like, well, is Coach Orozco like I had all these other questions, and he's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just letting you know. And like that was shocking. And I think what made it even harder was like knowing that there's a chance you were going to leave as well.
Yeah.
And then I think with Adam Hall's situation, it's like they already knew he was leaving. So it's like
Yeah.
that last like month and a half. I'm trying to think, maybe you were there still for maybe like a month, just kind of waiting for like the interview process for some of these other guys before deciding to leave. And man, I was like, I understood, why,
Yeah.
I understood the situation, but didn't make it easy.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to say I'd gone to a leadership conference back in Virginia, that the Marine Corps was putting on in Quantico, Virginia. I think when Mendoza, um, he got the job, and then Boise State was going to announce, and so him and Karen Langston came over and told the wrestling team. I think I was out of town, yeah, because I wasn't there. I wasn't there for it because word was starting to get out, and so he was going to wait for me until I got back, but word was starting to get, rumor mill starting to get out. So he was like, "Hey, I'm just going to jump on this." Like, that's okay. You got to do what you got to do. And then I finished out my contract till June 30th. So yeah, um, yeah, I still think about that from time to time. Just that whole how things transpired, where we're at today. Um, yeah, it was definitely wasn't an easy time, right? I mean, it was yeah, like I said, maybe worked out the way it did. And it can't go back, can't change anything. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. Um, but yeah, that wasn't an easy time. Yeah, growing up in that program, growing up in that town, all the things that place had done for me, and just deciding to venture out and do something different. That wasn't easy. So, but,
I mean, there's an element of like risk too, it's like you're kind of getting out of your comfort zone. It's like, you're trying to build a family as well.
yeah,
And then you have that connection with Mendoza, and it's kind of like, hey, we're going to go do something different that, maybe is a little bit more, at the time, maybe a little bit more of a supportive environment, if you say it,
yeah,
especially maybe from the school side.
yeah,
And I think, I've talked to Mendoza about this as well. It's like him leaving was hoping it was going to maybe in some ways benefit CSUB, because it's like, hey, like we just had maybe the most successful team that we've had since the program got, dropped per se.
Yeah.
Like, we cut funding and we just won the Pac-12 dual championship that year. It's like we have some momentum and we had a pretty good recruiting class. And it's like, what are you guys really going to do about this? Like, do you guys really care about the program? Like, is this something that, you think you're going to change? And if not, then, I'm going to go somewhere where, they're saying they do care about the program. But, man, that must have sucked getting over there, though. and then dropping
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and that was kind of the thought, because when Mendoza and when I got on staff, like I remember talking with him, like, all right, here's where we're at. Here's the guys we have coming in, like with Bryce and Adam and Ruben and Ian and like all those guys, right? Here's where we want to be at in 5 years, and just really just trying to figure out how are we going to get there with the limited amount of support that we had and the things that we had to do. And so just slowly chipping away at it, right? And just trying to improve every year, just do what we can. And I felt like we got to a point, right, to where we were knocking on the door. A couple things go our way. I think, we win the Pac-10 tournament. Like I said, we won the dual meet portion of the season. Third, qualified 5 guys. Was close to having possibly 6 or 7 with Sergio and Williams maybe sneaking in there. We had the second highest team GPA, I think, for the men's side. I think 3rd overall. I think we were behind men's golf. Was men's golf still around then? I think so.
No, I think it was just women's golf.
Is it just
right?
women's? Well, men's golf dropped at some point.
No, men's golf dropped after. I think you're right.
Yeah. So on the men's side, we were behind men's golf, and then we were behind men's and women's as an overall, right? So we were doing pretty good. We had some good guys come in. Was our last year? Was that your redshirt year?
That was my second year. So that was my redshirt freshman year.
Okay. So, we had some good guys coming in. You had like Dale Riva and Rolfing and
Jacob Thalen was in that class.
Yeah,
the Panchik
Thalen.
brothers.
Yeah. And Silvera done a really good job of getting you guys, or a lot of those guys, out to some redshirt tournaments, right? And so it felt like it had some momentum and we could keep building on it. And I remember conversations, and I wasn't part of them, but just kind of, talking with Mendoza before we went in these conversations, like we need something. The donors need something. The community needs something, like pay for a coaching position, pick up scholarships, buy us a mat. Honestly, if they would have bought us 3 mats, it would probably still be me and Mendoza there right now. Because I don't remember if you remember how bad those mats were.
No, I have a side story for you. So
Okay.
It's funny because our mat right now isn't great, and I go into practice and I'm all excited. I'm like, oh, guys, we got a new mat, and they're like, what? And I'm like, we got a new mat. We gotta go in the restroom right now. We gotta get set up. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, all right, everybody get to the end, grab a corner. We pull it over. I'm like, new mat.
Yeah.
We just flipped it.
And
Mendoza did the same thing.
I remember doing that. Like, like nail polish remover to get all the gunk off, and then like taping it, and things like that. And I don't know who will hear this or won't hear this, but I remember like one time, like the water heater went out. I'm trying to remember whose class we were recruiting. So our water heater went out in the wrestling room. And so guys were taking showers over like in the old swim locker room. And we had a recruit coming in. I'm like, remember getting the team together. I'm like, guys, I need you to shower in our locker room. My coach was cold. I'm like, I know, but we have a recruit and we're working on getting this fixed. And like the administration's like, well, we want to charge you X amount to replace this water heater. And so finally the facilities guys caught wind of it. They're like, don't worry, we'll take care of it. And then they got taken care of the next week, but they're going to charge us like 10 grand. It's like on top of what we were already fundraising to be there. It's like, so things like that. So yeah, just things like that. So Mendoza's just trying to get the school to step up and do something. And then when they wouldn't, Fresno State was opening up, Boise State opened up, and he's like, you know what? He goes, I feel like if I'm here, and this is me kind of putting some words in his mouth, but if I feel like I'm here, then, they know I love this program too much to let it fail. And so they're, why buy the cow when they're getting the milk for free, essentially?
Yeah.
And so, quality of life too. I mean, it's a lot of work, putting in a lot of time, wearing a lot of different hats. He had two, he still has two kids, but two young kids at the time. And so, yeah, it's a lot of work. So, and so just, yeah. So, I mean, they did. I think they stepped up. I'm not sure what they did. They bought mats after Mendoza left. I think you guys got mats right away.
Yeah.
And then and I remember even talking with Ziggy, and I'm like, because he asked me, goes, hey, is this something you're interested in? I go, well, Ziggy, I'm not trying to be cocky. I'm not trying to call the shots. But what's going to change? Like, is there something going to change? Otherwise, we got to, I don't know. At that point, we'd been fundraising for 6 years, 14 years later, they've helped out some, but they're still somewhat a self-funded program, right?
Well, the game has changed too.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like some of the like the rules in terms of giving out scholarships. Like now you have to give out 20% minimum if you're going to give out a scholarship.
Yeah.
No longer at CSUB can you be a freshman and not have to stay on the dorms. The only way you don't have to stay on the dorms if you live within 30 miles. So there's like all these other things that have kind of added to it. So it's like, yeah, things are a little bit better. It's still a drop in the bucket. And then it's like you add all these other things. It's like, well, how can you still be competitive? And I feel like it makes it pretty tough still. But I think it's just, I don't know. I mean, there's still a way to do it. Like I feel like in anything can be replicated. And I think there are ways to do things. It's just, are you willing to do that? Do you have the support of the community to do that? I mean, that's kind of the next thing that kind of goes into what's happening, I think, now.
Yeah, you just got to get creative, right? I mean, I know we were fortunate enough that a lot of the guys qualified for FAFSA, right? So I was able. So I mean, I think we had 3.3 or 3.5 scholarships. And then Coach Kerr had set up an endowment back starting in the 80s, and it paid out, I think, $30,000 a year at the time. So with that included, like I think we had 4.5 scholarships, right? So obviously you have to spread that across 30-ish guys. So luckily a lot of guys qualified for FAFSA, right? So we're able to give some scholarship. Here's your FAFSA. You actually have a pretty good deal. We're able to sell, hey, you can live off campus. We can plug you in. You can live cheap. But yeah, you just got to get creative. I think, like you said, where there's a will, there's a way, and you just got to start thinking outside the box and different things you can do, different things that are gonna, harvest fruit, per se. But yeah, it's tough. It's changed. I've had some conversations with Luke, and he's just picked my brain on some things. I'm like, yeah, man, like I don't envy what you have to go through these days. So, especially with this NLI deal, like I think it's great. But it's also tough in the same sense. Like, how does a smaller program, continue to build success, right? When they get someone spun up, they're good, but they don't have the funds to pay them what some of these other programs will, right? So it's, almost become a feeder program to another program.
Yeah, I know that there's a couple guys that competed this year that came from smaller programs like Hellenic, Northern Illinois, Will Feldkamp from Clarion. And it's like, these guys have proven that you can be an All-American at some of these, mid-major and smaller schools. But then it's just, you get poached. And I know in some circumstances, like honestly, I think with COVID, if you graduate from the university and maybe have exhausted all options, or if you want to go to a graduate school and they're offering to cover most of that, if not all of it, I mean, I have no ill will towards that.
Yeah.
Personally, I feel like I'm a pretty loyal guy. And I think, if you commit to go to a place for at least until you get your bachelor's, like you should do that.
Yeah.
But, also being maybe a kid that didn't come from a lot of money, if I was really good and somebody put, some of these numbers that you hear about in front of me, and I don't know, I might take $100,000 to go to maybe a different school. I don't know.
It's tough, right? I go back and forth because I was a junior when they cut the program, right? And so Oklahoma and Nebraska were recruiting me pretty hard. And I don't know what kind of money I would have gathered. Right? At that point, I was a 3-time qualifier, Pac-10 champ, had one more year of eligibility. So, something. But again, I mean, that can change the trajectory of your life, right? To where, no, now you can buy a house, right? And now you can start, making some money here, doing some other things. Ultimately, we say Bakersfield, I elected to stay, because partly because of that loyalty, right? When no one else gave me a chance, like Kerr and Mendoza were knocking on my door saying, "Hey, we can get you good, Orozco. We can make you something." But in the same sense, like I mean, they were offering pretty good scholarships. But I also knew like I had financially a pretty good situation at Bakersfield too. But rewind, 14 years ago, if someone's like even $50,000, hey, $50,000 on top of a full ride scholarship to come wrestle here, it's like, shoot, man, like what can I do with that?
Pretty good.
Right. So I mean, I don't blame the kids. But I don't know. I wish I don't have an answer for it. I just always root for the small guy. I want to see the Edinburghs, the Bakersfields, the Northern Illinois. I want to see those programs succeed. Like seeing those guys have guys on the podium. I just, hopefully they're able to find a way. Like Ludwig out of Northern Illinois, and he recruited me out of high school, and I still talk to him every now and then. But yeah, good guy. I want to see him succeed. Hopefully he's able to crack the nugget over there and find a way to keep the Olympics, right? So maybe they can get 2-time All-Americans instead of just 1-time, right?
Yeah, and I think the selling point that I think for a lot of guys is after you're done, like what is your plan? Is it something that I mean, are you going to keep wrestling?
Yeah.
Like, do you want to wrestle? Do you want to try to make a world and Olympic team? Is that one of your goals, or is it something that you kind of want to move on to a different field? There's a reason that you chose this particular university, and yeah, obviously there's a big wrestling element too, but it's also the network. Like, what was really cool about Cal State Bakersfield, and what was really cool about this area is I kind of had a network just by proxy of wrestling at CSUB, and I was able to get a pretty good teaching job right out the gate over people that maybe have been teaching longer, because I had 0 years of experience. And because of that, I was able to get a really good job. And it's like, that's kind of maybe the same thing that you have to kind of pitch to these athletes sometimes. It's like, you're not just getting access to this education, but you're also getting access to what happens after. So, again, just using Bakersfield as context, it's like, well, do you want to get into oil? Do you want to get into agriculture? Do you want to teach? Because all these alumni have access. They're all in all these different fields. So you're not just coming here for the wrestling. You're not just coming here for the academics, but you're coming here for what happens after as well.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you said got to get creative, right? If you don't have the dough just to throw around, like you gotta figure it out. I just, I've always put myself in that situation. If I was coaching, how would I approach it? I guess the one thing I'd always say is like, tell the athletes, hey, it's inevitable. You might get approached. Things might happen. All I ask is that you have conversations with me beforehand, right? Before you decide to pull the trigger or get too far down a road where you feel like you can't back up. Because, maybe there's something we can do that I don't, quite understand or know or, help out with. But
all this stuff is happening too. And you would think that people, like, I don't really see a lot of people taking screenshots of it. Like these people that are supposedly reaching out and asking people to enter the portal and stuff like that. Like you would think people, I think on Twitter, they call it like, would be able to see the receipts.
Yeah.
It's like, where are the screenshots of these, maybe conversations as well? Cause it's like, if you're thinking about entering the portal, I mean, that's happened a couple of times where even just in the last few years, just teams in California. But I think the whole, like some of these bigger schools reaching out either by, a booster or by like a club coach or something like that to these athletes and be like, hey, if you enter the portal, this team's going to give you this amount of money basically through NIL for you to go. I don't know. You feel like just with how much the wrestling community talks and there's rumor mills and things like that, there'd actually be maybe a little more hard evidence. And maybe there is, maybe we just don't have access to it. But I don't know. I feel like it would be a bigger deal than maybe by being able to see that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I don't know. Like you said, there's evidence out there somewhere, right? I mean, you can't do anything these days without something being screenshotted or somehow being recorded. But yeah, interesting times. I'm kind of curious to see how things turn out over the next 4, 5, 10 years. See where this all transpires. So, yeah. Have you heard any word on where some of these Pac-12 schools are going to go for conference wise?
Yeah, so ASU is going to go to Big 12.
Well, yeah, I guess I was more asking
then,
like the remaining, like Oregon State.
Yeah, so like Little Rock, Oregon State, CSUB, and then I think Cal Poly.
Yeah,
maybe those 4. So what I've heard is that there is maybe one more year of like the contract where they're supposed to be in there, and then after that, they're either going to look, or while they're doing that, they're going to try to add more affiliate schools, and see if maybe they can try to get some of those big 12 schools back over. But I don't know. I think with what's happening with the Pac-12 conference as a whole outside of wrestling, it's kind of crazy because if you look at the schools themselves, they're going to these other places. It's not just the wrestling programs. Like Stanford's in the ACC, which is wild to me. And a lot of it has to do with, I think, with like TV rights and money that they're receiving from the conference. And it's a business ultimately, right? So it would be interesting to see. From what I've heard, I think they're going to try to have some kind of wrestling conference, just a standalone. Something that was kind of there before with Utah Valley and Wyoming and North Dakota State. And we'll kind of see maybe that happens again. But I have no idea. Like, I think, just from my talks with Smith, I think, they're open to either staying if they can get more affiliates to Pac-12, or they're also open to going into another spot. But the question is, though, it's like, why would you join the Pac-12 conference?
You have to have something to sell, right? And I mean, if you don't have anything to offer.
I mean, like, how do you get to the national tournaments? Like, you either, have a high enough RPI and you get those wins underneath your belt, or you win the conference. But if you have less than 6, I think, you don't get an automatic qualifier.
So I think unless the rules have changed, because there was always teetering of like what would happen. But you can drop down to 5 for 1 year or 2 years before you have to find a 6, but 6 is the minimum to have automatic qualifiers. So, I wasn't sure. I mean, I'm kind of out of the collegiate wrestling loop a little bit, for outside of what I see on Twitter or on Facebook. But I wasn't sure if maybe you heard some rumblings from all your talks and travels.
Yeah. You're helping. You said you're helping out with the youth, and I've seen you kind of get involved a little bit with Meridian. How much time are you able to kind of get in there and?
Not as much as I'd like, right? I mean, I'll try to string together, a little bit here and there, just with the time I got off and taking care of the kids and different things. I'm hoping to get in there more and more this year. As much as I can get in, then I'll get in, right? Sometimes I was like, I can get 2 weeks in a row where I'm consistently there 2 or 3 days, and then sometimes it'll be, a month before I can get back in. Just kind of depends on how work schedule lines out, things I got going on with the kids. But I enjoy it. I enjoy being part of that program. Really like that coach. So he's a good guy. And then McCray, we'll go to the little feeder program, and like I said, there's probably a handful of 4 to 6-year-olds that are just running around. So I'll grab them and stance in motion and just learn how to do shots and learn just how to actually land on somebody when you do a shot, or you like, right, just that
Not rolled over.
yeah, and just really just work on coordination and just I try to build some drills that are going to translate into actual wrestling technique.
Yeah.
Because they're like, all right, yeah, you got to move, get in your stance. So they get down in their stance. I'm like, all right, now you got to move in your stance, and then they like stand up, or they like get down real low, and they like duck walk. I'm like, okay. So I got like one of those dodgeballs. And so I'm like, all right, we're gonna, you know how you guys walk the dog? Yeah. I'm like, all right, so we're gonna walk the ball. So they have to like stay down in their stance and like roll the ball with their hand. So it teaches them to stay low and move, and then even like sprawling coordination. Like the other day, we're doing sprawls, and they just don't have the coordination to hit a shot and be a good partner, and like the reaction time to sprawl. Like they're still trying to get it. So again, I got the dodgeballs out. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna roll this ball, and you have to squish it with your chest. And so it was a game, and they're super excited. So like they're getting in the line. I'm just rolling the ball at them, a little bit slow. Then they're getting the hang of it, then faster, and then maybe kind of to one side or the other. And so really just trying to identify drills or games like that are eventually going to build habits to when a person does actually take a shot on them. Right now, they have that motor skill, that neural pathway of hitting a sprawl, right? Or staying in their stance and moving. Just because right now I'm like, all right, move your arm just a little bit. And they're like, I'm like, okay.
Well, plus, like, I think kids get bored super quick,
Yeah.
and I think if you can find ways to kind of slick like the skill in there, without making it all like super serious, like I think that's what kids like. So that like the game stuff, like I'm gonna steal that and I'm gonna use that like with the ball.
Yeah, like we do that, and then I got like
toe tag. Like toe tag's good. Like learn, I think, like how to level change.
We do
have
toe tag. And then what I'll take that a step further. So I have like a bunch of paracord that I've cut into pieces, and I'll thread it through like their shoelace, and they have to wrestle till they pull out the shoelace. So it's just again because the toe touch, like they start doing it, and then they kind of get bored with it. So then that's just another level of all right, now they have to work harder to get. Then they'll get in scrambles, right, and they're rolling around, but they're so just fixated on getting that shoe right. They're just building those slides of being in this position and wrestling and getting up and moving and not just dropping and reaching. So it's all just trying to figure out ways to keep their attention span because they got about 2 minutes of instruction before I gotta actually put it to use. Otherwise, they're gone. So,
I've kind of developed pretty close, I think, friendship with Alfontes because we talk all the time, dude. He'll just randomly call me and just go on like this long spiel about this thought that he's had. And honestly, it's like if you love wrestling, I love wrestling, and like we could be friends. So that's kind of how that's happened. Really cool dude, but it's funny. He's talking a lot about like divisions, and I know in Idaho he was talking about how there's like this kind of thought about maybe getting rid of the 3 divisions and making it a 1-class state tournament. And he's kind of using California as an example. And he actually, would like California maybe to possibly be 3 divisions. I kind of want to talk about that a little bit because how many divisions were there when you were wrestling in Nevada?
3. So there's 4A, 4A, 3A, and then 2A and 1A were like combined. At the time, my school was 4A, so the big division. I mean, it matters, but it does. I don't know. I like California because it's cool, right? Like if you're a state placer in California, like for the most part, like you've gone through the gauntlet and you've done you put in the work, you've developed, like it's validated, right? No one can take that away from you. You're a California placer in a 1 division state, to where like some of these other schools that, or I should say other states, they have multiple divisions. I was a whatever time state champ. Okay, well, what division, right? But from a coaching perspective, like college coaching perspective, then you kind of had your standards. Like, all right, if you place X at California State, I kind of knew what level you were on, kind of knew what to expect. But if I was recruiting anybody out of state, even if they won their state 4 times in a row, like you just look at what tournaments they went to. How they do at Reno, how they do at Flow Nationals, however they did at Fargo, right? And across the board, like the good guys, they're gonna go wrestle at Fargo. The good guys are gonna go wrestle at USA Nationals or Flow Nationals or the tough tournaments, right? They're going to get to the Doc B. They're going to get to the Reno THC. They're going to get to all these tournaments. And so you can see how they stack up against, the guys in California. So, all right, I know this guy's kind of at this level, and he wrestled this guy who's a state placer in California. Okay, so you can kind of validate it, right? So I mean, I think it's good because maybe it gets some excitement from the school, like, hey, so and so went to state, so and so placed at state, so and so was a state champ, and I think that's great. But I think the one thing that parents need to realize, just because you place at state, just because you won state, doesn't mean that you're going to be a Division I recruit. Doesn't mean that you're going to be a D2 recruit, right? Doesn't mean that you're guaranteed scholarship. The tough guys, they wrestle at Fargo. The tough guys wrestle at, name whatever tournament. Like that's where they're going to be. And I mean, like I remember seeing he was a Gilroy kid. I wrestled him at Western Regionals, and then he went on to wrestle for Michigan. He beat Lewis Bland in the state finals a while ago. Hunter Collins, I think that was his name. But there's like guys like that, right? I remember seeing like just guys I grew up with, and when I'd see him at the big tournaments, I'd see him at Western Regionals, I'd see him at Fargo, I'd see him at the Reno TOC. And those are the same names that I'd see when I was wrestling in college, right? And so if you go back, you look at all the little kid tournaments as they grow up, like the good kids, they're wrestling at the bigger tournaments as they get older and different things. So just because you're a state placer or a state champ doesn't mean that you're guaranteed success in college or that you're going to get a scholarship. That'd be my only thing, right? I hear the argument of, well, it would gain more attraction to college coaches. Like, well, the college coaches are still they're gonna check the results, if you will. So
yeah, I think that kind of cuts both ways. And I feel like I've kind of gone back and forth on it because when I was in high school, I never placed. I was around 12 as a senior. Yeah. And I remember when Mendoza first called me, my thing was like, dude, I don't know if I'm good enough to wrestle Division I because I wasn't a state placer. Yeah. And I was talking to Daniel McCune about that because he was like a big reason I think why I ended up going to CSUB in the first place is because he kind of pushed that and had that connection with you guys. And, I think his point is like, yeah, I understand. Maybe if we had, 3 divisions and I placed third in Division III, then maybe, or the lower division, maybe that would have given me confidence. But he's like, remember what you're doing right now and remember what happened in that process. I asked all like the people within my network, hey, like, what do you think about this? And all of them said you should do it. Yeah. And it's like, if you're a coach, you should be trying to give your athletes confidence.
Yeah.
A medal shouldn't make them confident or not. Like, obviously it helps, but it's like, ultimately it's like you have to use your judgment. And now that we've kind of wrestled at this higher level, it's like when we see kids that are maybe in our high school programs or kids that are coming up to our youth programs, it's like, hey, you have potential and you kind of have to maybe believe in them first before they believe in themselves. Yeah. So I probably wouldn't have tried walking on if I didn't think I had any kind of shot. But I knew that once I walked in through those doors for practice, I was like, I'm here and I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
This might be uncomfortable, but I'm going to be here. I'm not going to go away.
Yeah. And ultimately that's what it comes down to, right? Is the coaches, you got to advocate for your guy, but you also got to be honest, right? You can't say, hey, you know what? You can be anything you want to be. It's like, well, you can, but there's a price you got to pay for it. There's a sacrifice. There's a commitment that you got to have for it, right? You can't just tell guys that, right? And it's like, no, hey, if you want to be here, this is what you got to do. And here's where you need to go. Here's what you need to seek. And this is how, you need to approach it. And like for me, like I remember at one state, I did pretty well. And then I was rounded 12 at high school nationals, and this is before like they had like, you know, it was out of Virginia Beach, or no, it was in Pittsburgh, but still Virginia Beach, right? The River High School Nationals. But this is before Flow and USA focused on nationals. So um so go out there around at 12, and I was like, crap. Well, no one's really calling me, right? Or no one's, I thought I won state. I did all these things. Luckily I ran into Mendoza, talked to him, and they got me out. But I had like some JUCO schools calling me, some NAI schools that were, hey, you don't want this, want that. And I mean, obviously I could have went there and probably had a good career. But I remember thinking on the plane ride home from Pittsburgh, like, okay, like no matter where I go, I'm going to work hard, whatever level I go. I'm going to sacrifice time away from family, friends. And I'm going to, it's going to be a commitment. That's a given. So if I'm going to do all this, like I might as well put my hat in the ring for Division One. And so that was my mentality. And it wasn't to knock other divisions, but I was like, well, I'm going to go there. I'm going to give it my best shot. And maybe after a year or two, I got to reevaluate. Like, hey, you know what? This isn't for me, or maybe I can't do it. But I have to at least go there and try. Like if I'm going to work hard. I'm going to sacrifice no matter where I go. So I might as well put myself in a position to try to wrestle at the highest level. And even, I mean, I think you got to have that approach for, whatever level, if Division One's your ultimate level, but you're not there, well, then again, got to get creative. What JUCOs feed into a couple Division One schools that I want to go to. Maybe I go and wrestle for Keesaw because I know that he's a Division One national champion. He pumps out some pretty good guys, and I can get some really good coaching there, and I can set up my academic track to where it transfers perfectly to whatever school, right? Maybe that's your way. I mean, you look at like Raphael Davis.
Yeah.
He didn't even qualify for state, and he's an All-American a couple years later. Maybe it's, hey, I know I'm going to take my lickings, and I'm just going to be a practice partner for the first 3 years, but that fourth year, I'm going to have my time to shine, right? It's just, you got to understand, what the price is and put your best foot forward and, make a plan, execute the plan, and maybe along the way, the plan changes, but you got to have a plan, right?
Yeah. I think for me, when I got there, I was just so focused on just trying to wrestle in college and hopefully Division One that when I got there, I feel like I wasted my first 2 years.
Yeah.
I had Adam and I had Bryce and those guys that were in front of me in the lineup. And in my head, I'm like, I'm not going to beat those guys.
Yeah.
And I'll wait till my third year and that'll be my time. And I remember it was, after you guys left and Manny came in and, Penacek and Lorenzo and those guys were now going to be eligible to start, competing in the lineup. I lost my wrestle off to Matt Penacek in the beginning of the year. And I was like, crap. What have I been doing the last couple of years?
Yeah.
And I think that part was very important because I kind of had to remember why I was here. It's like, I'm here to work hard. I'm here to try my best to improve and get better. And maybe I wasn't taking that as serious the last couple of years, but it's in the past. And now I have to focus on the present. And I don't think I never qualified for nationals, but, I started pretty much those 3 years. And, I think looking at maybe where I was in high school to maybe where I ended, I'm not satisfied with it, but, I don't necessarily have bad feelings about it either. Yeah. But I think, again, it's good to kind of reminisce that part. Just maybe to kind of remind yourself, it's like you might not be the accolades wides, maybe somebody that traditionally would go to Division One route, but I think it's also important too to remember that we're here to have fun, we're here to get better at something, and we're here to work hard.
Yeah. I mean, it's just attacking it, right? I mean, and not, it's got to be somebody. Why not you, right? I mean, someone's got to put on that singlet, and I mean, it's well, and kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, right? You have people that kind of check you or put in perspective. Like now, like I said, my career didn't end the way I wanted it to, and I had to make peace with it. And the one thing that I still pour into my coaching is that I don't want someone to go down the same path I did or make the same mistakes. Or I mean, I've already made them. Why does someone else that is close to me that I know has to make them again? Whether it's my son, whether it's a guy I coach, or even just a friend in a different arena of life. Like, why does someone have to make the same mistakes, right? And so that was always my mentality as a coach. And did I always accomplish that? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But that was my goal. Like, hey man, like I put in a lot of time and effort and I didn't get what I wanted. How can I help people not, fall trapped to that same mentality, or it's not mentality, but same path,
Yeah.
and understanding and yeah, and even making peace with it, right? Career ends, now what, right? Didn't end the way I wanted it to, so I get into coaching, and then my coaching career didn't necessarily end the way that I wanted it to, and transition, and but again, it's just all right. Well, what's the next thing, right? And kind of again circling back, kind of changed careers 3 times, if you will. I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of it, so. You just get a little better, a little better, a little better, and just yeah, all right, well, let's tackle this new challenge or chase after this or do something else, right? But each time just a little bit better.
Well, we've been going a little bit over an hour.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thanks for coming on the show. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe get some of the other guys. Maybe that used to coach, or have them on too. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, anytime. Yeah, I'm happy. I remember you reaching out to me saying, "Hey, would you listen to this if I started a podcast?" I was like, "Yeah, I would." But yeah, no, it's fun going back and listen to some guys you interview and watching you guys. So, yeah. Although it's funny because you talk to any firefighter and like, oh, it's the best job in the world, and I say, it's the second best. So, outside of being a dad, yeah, spending that time with you guys in that room with blue mats all around, like those were some of the best times. So, yeah, proud of you guys. Keep up the good work, though. So.
That was episode 51 with Riley Orozco. If you guys enjoy the show, please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify. You can check out all of our previous podcasts on YouTube, Spotify, as well as CaliWrestling.com. Really, again, thankful for you guys for following, and see you guys next time.